more space than before.
Good afternoon, Matt.
Hello, good afternoon, Rohan. Normally this is my bit. I feel usurped.
I feel like I've scooped you here.
You have. I was going to say, you're looking very smart today. And then I saw you scroll down slightly, and it's not only is it a T-shirt, but you have some kind of commercial message there on.
It's a present for my 30th, Matt, in commemoration of my love for apple crumble.
I was going to ask if the lockdown was getting to you, but I think we've got an answer there.
Well, I baked some, as Dylan will attest, I baked some goodies for the team and brought them in. So I'm clearly finding more interesting ways to use my time these days.
You know, there's some really good goodies, I must add, as well.
Hi, Dylan.
Really tasty. Hello, Matt. How are you?
I'm well. I mean, it's been a while since I came into the office because I don't drive, and crossing half of Britain is, under the present circumstances, extremely naughty. So I haven't done it, but all of a sudden I'm quite tempted.
I'll definitely recommend, especially for the goodies.
Oh, and we've got lots of members of the team. I can see that Will 2 is here. I appreciate that's not his name. Been watching too much cricket. The sledging has already commenced. So yeah, hello everyone. Welcome to our open day. This is, I guess, our 4th, maybe our 5th of the year. They've been a great success so far. We've had well over hundreds of people have come. They've asked hundreds of questions, and we've been able to set up dozens, if not close to 100 consults out of these. So it's been a really productive kind of approach to what we're doing that we're really proud of. And I can see we've got a really lovely big number of people here this week. So we've already sort of confused matters a little bit by talking among ourselves, but I'm going to start introducing people. Rohan, you're first on my list of people. Who are you? Why are you here?
That's a good question, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Rohan Agarwal. I actually went to Cambridge. I founded UniAdmissions there. And my background is I studied natural sciences my first few years, then transferred to a medical degree, completed my training, worked as a doctor for a few years. And now I work exclusively full-time on UniAdmissions, helping students and parents make the right decisions. So I'm kind of our super specialist on the medical front, along with my co-founder. And we really deal with kind of the nitty-bitty grits of which college should I apply to, which university should I apply to, and those type of queries. But my main job is just to improve and continue to improve our success rates year after year after year. So the data's still coming in. I'm sure Matt's got more updates for us, but last year in 2019, we got 2/3 of our students in, and every year my aim is to continue to improve that.
Fab. Dylan, who are you? Oh no, it's me next. My name is Matt. I look after our research here at UniAdmissions, which means I spend a lot of time working closely with Rohan. My job is also to make sure that our success rates go up. And my part in that is making sure that everything we suggest and recommend and sort of plan for the students we work with is grounded in data. So that everything we try, it's stuff we know will actually work, which is exciting and challenging and involves a lot of Microsoft Excel, but has allowed us to do some really exciting things over the past couple of years in terms of really focusing in on the things that have the biggest impact on student success. And we're hoping, that's my project for the next few weeks, that's going to show up in our success rates for this year when we finally get all of that data together, now that the vast majority of people have received their offers. Oh, and I've had an important accessibility query. So we do have subtitles available. Thank you, Kaya. Now, in my experience, the subtitles only work when I'm speaking. Why? I've never been entirely clear, but thank you for reminding me to put them on. That is a good point. Dylan, sorry, it's your turn now as we go down the list.
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Dylan. I'm one of the senior consultants at UniAdmissions. So I work really closely with all our initial inquiries. So if you do want to have a conversation with us and assess your application, see your chances of getting into Cambridge or Oxford or any other kind of uni, it's my job to assess your application and see what your chances are of getting in. Not only that, but also to see how we could help, or if not us, point you in the direction of someone who could, to increase your chances of getting into your dream university. So yeah, I spend a lot of time on the phone speaking to students and parents, which is why I've got a fancy headset. But nonetheless, we'll come to that a little bit later. So that's me in a nutshell.
Fab. And we'll be joined later by Safia, who's a current med student at in London at Arts, I think. I'm sure she'll correct me later. And she's going to help out with any questions you might have about what it's like being a med student who's in the midst of their training, and also obviously in the midst of the famous virus So she'll be our kind of, it is at Barts, thank you, Safia. She'll be able to help out with all of those kind of nose to the ground kind of questions that Rohan's, sadly, as he mentioned earlier, just much too old to answer. He's been upset about being 30 for weeks, so I'm not going to let it go.
I got a lot of presents, which helped. So.
As I mentioned earlier, today we're going to be focusing on what it takes to become a doctor, giving you an overview of that process and the support we're able to offer if that's something you decided to do. Next week, we're going to be switching focus substantially, and we're going to be talking about soft skills, not just for admissions interviews at places like Oxford and Cambridge and for medicine, but also for your life in general. As you'll find that even if you don't, as was my experience, have the fortune to get into Oxford that first time, those soft skills will help you out throughout the rest of your life. If you are convinced by us today, you really enjoy the presentation and you decide you would like to come and work with us as a student, please get in touch by booking a consultation. That'll allow us to make sure that we have the right program for you, that you are the right student for us, and give you the chance to really understand what we're able to offer in the kind of detail that we're not going to be able to offer during the Q&A later on, because unfortunately there are quite a lot of you, and giving you each a 20-minute Q&A would, at a guess, I'm not very good at maths, I think it would take well over 9 hours based on the number of people who are here, and I don't want to. I want to go to bed sooner than that. It's as simple as that. So if you are keen to work with us, please do book a consultation, and Dylan or Will too, or someone else from the team over there with the consultants will get in touch and help you there. Now, as we mentioned earlier, it is no longer 2020, thank goodness, but some things did go okay. We're particularly proud of the number of students we worked with last year, which was well over 400. Each of those students worked with at least 4 tutors on average. And these numbers, I still haven't chased up to get these fixed, because they're the same as last week. I'm sure that the data must be finalized by now. We're fairly confident that we had well over 10,000 hours of study split between all of those students. So some really, really impressive work going on there. If any of you have read the famous Malcolm Gladwell book on this subject, you'll know that's enough time to become an expert, according to him. Unfortunately, it's because 400 people, that probably doesn't work in quite the same way, but we like to think that we've taken all of them a step on towards that level of expertise. And I can never remember if included or not included in that 400 are the 93 students we worked with through UniAdmissions Foundation last year. We're aiming to have a 1-to-1 ratio next year. God, that's soon. That is to say, for every student who comes to work with us on a paid basis, we'll also be working with a student on a subsidized basis. And those subsidies go all the way down to 100% subsidy. Shocking as it may seem, we actually find it difficult to find enough students for the foundation. So if you're here with us and you're worried about cost, please do get in touch anyway. It's entirely possible that you'll be eligible to work with us on at a reduced cost basis through the foundation. And please do tell other people who might be interested. It seems crazy to say, but the biggest barrier we have is getting people in. It is not providing the education. I'm sure, Rohan, this is something you're working particularly hard on at the moment, I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the strangest things actually when we want people to apply for a program that's heavily subsidized, we actually suddenly find it very difficult to get people. So, you know, regardless of your socioeconomic background or your financial status, at the end of this presentation, if you feel like you'd benefit from support when you're actually serious about your application, please get in touch with us. We have several hundred fully funded places available this year, and it'd be a shame if they kind of just went to waste. And they start from as little as, well, £0, as Matt said. So don't let money be a barrier to attaining your dream university. It really shouldn't be.
So I don't want to undermine what we're going to come on to talk to later, but depending on who you are, we are quite literally giving it away. So please do get in touch. Our other great success last year with the books, my colleague Toby has worked really hard on these. I understand he's even read most of them, which if you've seen them on the shelf, well over a yard thick, some of them over 2 kilos in weight, an intimidating project. We're really proud of our books, which you can purchase on Amazon, or if you come and work with us, you get a frankly obscene library of our in-house publications, which cover every admissions test, the interview, the personal statement, choosing a college, pretty much everything. If you find that there's a gap in our provision, please let us know, and we will find authors and we will get that gap plugged as fast as we possibly can. It's something we take enormous pride in. And as I say, if you decide not to come and work with us on a full basis, these are in some cases the only, and in other cases merely the best book on each of these subjects. Related to the books, of course, is our ongoing research. This is what I do. This allows us to do all sorts of clever things. So, for example, this year, we were able to get hold of very early Bmac results from UCL, and using some clever algorithmic tricks, we were able to project out what we think will be the average score for someone who gets an offer from UCL based on the average information they were generous enough to provide us with. Obviously, this is far from certain, but this is the kind of insight we try to provide to our students so they can understand ahead of time the kind of standards they need to be meeting, and understand the impact that the work that we do can have on their application. As you can see here, the difference between an average applicant at UCL and what we think will be an average offer holder is only 0.6 in the Bmac. That may be as few as 2 or 3 correct answers. And so the support we offer can really help to give you that boost when it comes to the exam. This brings us to the pie chart, Rohan's favorite slide. Go on, Rohan.
Well, thanks, Matt. I think Dylan's quite keen to have a crack at this one. So
Dylan, would you like to have this slide?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be speaking with students and parents about this pretty much all the time. So I think it'll be a good opportunity to tell everyone about it. So obviously, when you're applying to university, there's going to be a number of different parts of your application. And it's interesting to know how they're going to be looking at or how the universities are going to be judging you on each part of the application. So Matt, our head of research, kindly made a nice pie chart for us to demonstrate this with. And it's useful for you guys as well to keep this in the back of your mind as well throughout the year. Okay, so if we start with the smallest section there in yellow, what I say to parents and students is that this is your personal statement and your references and so forth. And so it's 10%, so the smallest part of the application, but can still swing an application. You know, it still is percentage points that you want to make the most of, right? Now, everything else you can see pretty much has an equal weighting. So we start with the blue. This is what you are currently doing. So your academics, what you're doing at school. So when I'm assessing an application, I'll be looking at your GCSE results, as well as your predicted A levels, or how you, if you're quite early in your journey, just how you're feeling about your A levels, because that's going to make up 30% of your application, roughly. Okay. If we move down to the orange, you can see it weighs just as much as the blue. And this is the admissions test. So for you guys, for medicine, it would be either the Bmac or the Ucat that you'd have to write, depending on the university you're applying for. Now, the scores there would constitute 30% of your application. So you can see here that it's just as important as your academics. So keep that in mind when preparing for your application or when you're going through your admission cycle. All right. Next, if we move on to the gray, for those of you who can read at the bottom there, you'll see it's for the interview, and it's weighted just as much as the others. All right. And so if you, in the case of Oxford, who would interview less than Cambridge, okay, you would want to score really well in your BMAT and your academics to get an interview, whereas Cambridge would interview more applicants. However, as a whole, when looking at the application, you can see your interview would still hold a 30% weighting. So when you look at the pie chart, you want to sort of think about what it means to you and what you need to be doing during your admission cycle. Okay, of course, your academics are important. So you do want to get the best grades that you can in order to get into medical school. All right, but the UCAT, the Bmac, and your interviews are just as important. And the personal statement, of course, could swing your application if they were deciding between two. Okay, so keep that in mind. But yeah, great pie chart to illustrate all of that.
Thanks, Dylan. We've also had a very quick question. Does this apply to Oxbridge or medical schools? So this pie chart is specifically tailored towards Oxbridge applications, but actually the principles still do apply to pretty much every medical school in the UK. Now, obviously the exact segments will change. So certain medical schools, for instance, King's Medical School will have a huge predilection for the Ucat. So for instance, if your UCAT isn't above 2800, you're very unlikely to get an interview. Other medical schools like Keele or Brighton will actually happily consider you regardless of your admissions test scores. So it really does depend on the exact medical school, but this is a pretty good summary. People and students tend to really get worked up about the personal statement, and as Dylan said, that's actually the least important component of it. The major component is the GCSEs and the tests, regardless of which medical school you're applying to.
Yeah. Thanks, Rohan. In fact, in some of the research I've been working on, looking at applicants to Oxford, they will put more weight on the teacher reference than they will on the personal statement. And if you don't know anything about the teacher reference, that's because people don't know this. That's something to really think about as well when you're planning your application, making sure that your teacher has said something really nice about you, because often that will have just as much or even more weight than the personal statement. So that brings us on to the kind of stages of becoming a doctor, which we're going to sort of look at in more detail. So the first thing to say is that an awful lot of people want to be doctors at the moment. I don't know why. It's a mystery. Nothing particularly big going on in medicine at the moment. Very mysterious. Who can say? But loads of people want to be doctors. In fact, there have never been more people who want to be doctors than there are right now, and nurses as well. And I expect that's true for allied care professions through apprenticeships and other routes as well. As I say, no idea why, enormous mystery. So what do you do if you want to join their number? First thing you need is you're going to need some pretty good GCSEs, particularly if you're aiming for Oxford or Cambridge. We're talking about a lot of A stars, a lot of A's, 8s and 9s and 7s as they're now called. Obviously, I'm old, so I'm really having to force myself to remember that they're numbers now. You're going to have to study probably 3, maybe 4 if you're feeling like you want to show off. Science, technology, engineering, or maths, A levels for most medical schools. You're going to want to try and get some work experience in some aspect of medicine or care. We're going to come on to talk about work experience in a little more detail later. You're going to want to do really well in your A levels, probably probably AAA, or even better, getting some A stars in there. And you want those to be your predicted grades, and you're going to need to get them as well. And you're going to want to get some really good scores on the Ucat and the Bmac. So we're going to try and go through this in a kind of timeliney sort of way. So let's tick off that first one in our minds. You've got some great GCSEs, all 8s and 9s, maybe 1 7, or lots of 7s and an 8, something in that region. Now you've got to choose your A levels. So which ones should you pick? Now, you need to take chemistry. Pretty much every medical school requires you to take chemistry, so you've got to do it. You've got to take chemistry. A lot of medical schools will require that you take biology and chemistry, but you should definitely take a second science, even if you don't have to. So you want to be taking at least one of biology, physics, and maths alongside chemistry. As I said, biology is compulsory for a lot of places, including King's and Imperial. And when it comes to that third A level, although you're not obliged to take a third science subject, it is a good idea. Now, a lot of students come to us and say, well, I don't really like maths, or I don't really like physics or biology. Do I really have to do it? And we'll say, no, you don't have to do it. But when you get to medical school, there's going to be quite a lot of physics and quite a lot of biology in there. So if you don't do it now, that isn't going to help you avoid it later. You're still going to have to do it. So avoiding it at A level, while it seems like a good solution in the short term, it's not going to solve your problem. I don't know if when you were at Cambridge, Rohan, there was anyone who had tried this trick, only to discover they had to do it anyway, and they were behind.
No, not really. It doesn't, as you said, it's not a good idea.
No, I say if you are really desperate to take English, you can, but it means you'll have to do an awful lot of biology once you get there, and you'll be better served by spending 2 years getting ready for it by actually doing it.
I think the other thing is that, I don't know how many people we have in the audience who are in year 11 and considering taking their A-levels and which subjects to choose, but generally, actually, it's easier to do biology, chemistry, maths, physics as a block of 4 than it is to do history, chemistry, philosophy, and German, for instance, because actually those sciences don't overlap at all. So it can end up being not that much easier to do that subject combination than it is to do science. I know, for instance, when I did my maths, there was a huge overlap between the physics part and the mechanics part, which just made my life a lot easier. So it was effectively, I was only doing about 3 A-levels, at least in AS.
Yeah, that's a good point. It might seem exciting to try and do a mix of things, but you may be setting yourself up for an awful lot more work than you necessarily need to do. That brings us on to work experience. Work experience is really helpful in terms of applying for medicine for a number of reasons, which we're going to get into. And the first thing to say is the work experience does not need to be in a GP surgery or a hospital to be worthwhile work experience. You don't need to go and literally follow a doctor around for a week for it to count. You can go and work in a laboratory, you can go and work in some other scientific setting, you can go and work in a care home. Anything that is related to medicine in a really broad sense is going to be relevant. And obviously, a lot of people want to go and spend time hanging around in a hospital because that's more glamorous. But going and volunteering in a care home is going to be just as effective in terms of demonstrating your interest in medicine, perhaps even more so because working in a care home is less fun than working in a hospital. Now, obviously, because of the pandemic, many fewer students are going to be able to access work experience. This makes it much harder to get, but it does mean that if you can get it, it is going to be more valuable when you put it into that application. Now, again, because of the current circumstances, universities are perfectly happy with virtual work experience. But if you can convince a local care home or a GP to let you in, that's going to be really valuable for your application, but also really valuable to you as a person. People do sometimes think they want to be a doctor, and then they discover that they do not want to be a doctor quite suddenly when they discover what it actually involves. It involves a lot of old people, it involves a lot of gross stuff, it involves telling people things that are very upsetting, and it's really hard work. And it may be that you go and do that work experience in a hospital or a care home or somewhere like that, and you discover after 2 weeks that you do not want to be a doctor after all. And that's one of the really important parts of work experience. It is much easier to find out you don't want to be a doctor in your work experience than it is to find out several years into your training. I don't know, is there anyone you knew at school or at university, Rohan, who went through this kind of realization that care wasn't for them?
Quite a few, actually. Thankfully, I think most of them get filtered out before they apply, and this is why work experience is so important, because sometimes people kind of want to apply to medicine for the glorious aspects of it and the respect associated with things that they see on TV, but they don't kind of realize the somewhat nitty-gritty darker side of it. There is obviously a lot of hard work involved, and it can be quite draining at times, and it's important that people go into with a deep understanding of what the next 30-40 years of their life are going to look like.
Yeah, as I like to say, if you're going to get divorced, the best time to get divorced is before you get married. And if you don't want to be a doctor, the best time to find out is before you become a doctor. Because once you are a doctor, it's too late. Or at least awkward to change. That brings us on to the tests. So you've picked your A-levels, you're doing well. You're coming into that final year of school, you've done that work experience over the course of the summer. Now you're going to have to do one of the two, probably both, of the tests. The first one is the Bmac, the Biomedical Admissions Test. This is the test for Cambridge and Oxford and Imperial and a bunch of other medical schools, I think 12 or so. It's 2 hours long. You do it on paper, not this year when it was on computers, but probably next year we'll be back on paper because it didn't go well on computers. And it's in 3 parts. There's a section on verbal and numerical reasoning. There's a section on scientific knowledge, which has questions about biology, chemistry, and physics. And there's an essay section. And you have 2 opportunities to do the Bmac. You can either do it in September before you apply, or you can do it in November after you apply. This is an important strategic consideration when it comes to your application. And it's something that's really worth taking into account, and is one of the things we would talk to you about in a consultation. Really making sure that you pick your medical schools well, with a good balance between the exams and when you're sitting and all those sorts of things. The second exam is the Ucat, the University Clinical Aptitude Test. This is the test if you want to go to King's or to Exeter, Glasgow, Kiel, and others. There's a whole list of them that you can look up on our website and by Googling. It's also 2 hours long, but it is on computers, unlike the Bmac. It's in 5 parts. So they split up the verbal and numerical reasoning into 2 parts, which they call verbal and quantitative. There's a decision-making section. There's some abstract reasoning with like strange shapes, the part that I find impossible to do. And there's a situational judgment section where you're presented with various scenarios and asked what you would do if you were a good doctor. Now the Ucat is unusual because it takes place on a computer. The set of questions you are given is more or less randomly generated each time. This means that if you do the exam and you try and tell your friend the answers, probably won't work because they'll probably get different questions, which is a clever little piece of design. And again, you can sit it twice, both in September and November, although I expect that will change this year because the Ucat has particularly been moved around a lot by the circumstances of the pandemic, and so quite what they're going to do this year, I don't know. Again, it's worth getting in touch with us for the latest news on these exams and looking at the websites of the boards that administer them. So if you've done marvelously in your exam, you're going to find yourself quite quickly in an interview. Now, the most common format is the MMI. Rohan, can you tell us a little bit about the MMI? And I imagine give us a quick mention of the old style Oxbridge interview as well, which I haven't got a slide on, but obviously comes into play here as well.
Yeah, sure, Matt. So MMI stand for multiple mini interviews. And essentially, that's exactly what it sounds like. So they are short, somewhere between 5 to 15 minutes, depending on each medical school. And essentially you rotate around them. So you'll typically have anywhere between 4 to 15 stations of around 5 to 15 minutes each. So generally tends to be an hour and a half to 2.5 hours in duration. And you kind of go through each station. Now, some of the stations may not have an examiner. Some of them you may just have to kind of do a quick math calculation. You may have to write down how you prioritize certain things like which patients you'd go and treat or how you would handle a particular argument. Some of them will test your communication skills. The idea of this is to actually reduce bias in the interview process. They're very different to the old school panel interviews where you would traditionally just have a 30-minute or 20-minute conversation with an admissions tutor, or even the older days where you'd have 6 people on the panel staring at you, asking, firing questions one after the other. It's a really interesting way of kind of interviewing, and it does work very well. The reason they do this is actually it's very similar to what medical students go on to do in their medical student final exams, and actually what doctors do. So when I did my medical finals and when I did my postgraduate exams, we did very similar style of examinations. And you know, I'll make a big deal of this, but interviews are exams. And if you prepare for them properly, there's absolutely no reason you should fail an interview. It is very much a pass or fail thing, dependent on your preparation. So MMIs will test different competencies, things as like data analysis, how to handle prescribing, basic problems-based learning exercises, how to prioritize communication skills, questions testing motivation to be doctors, and so on and so on. If for those of you considering Oxbridge, the interview style is actually very, very different. That tends to be really focused on almost purely science. And typically, depending on the college you go through to and the application process, normally you'll have anywhere between 2 to 6 interviews, typically around 15 to 30 minutes each, and they'll almost all exclusively be about science. So in my interviews, for instance, I got asked what's the weight of the earth, how would you why is DNA like sheet music? How would you kill a patient without the police finding out? There's lots of very controversial questions. The idea isn't just to see what the answer is, it's more to see the thought process. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about the Oxbridge interview process and Q&A as well. But the key thing here is that the MMI is very, very different. And if you prepare properly, there is absolutely no reason why you shouldn't pass them. Whereas the Oxbridge interview styles, much more old school, much more science focused, more of a discussion or a mock tutorial instead.
Fab, thanks. To sort of concretize this, because I realize that's an awful lot of information, I pulled out a few questions that you might be asked in an MMI. These are drawn from our book, The Ultimate Guide to Medical Interviews, which, well, it does what it says on the tin. So here are some questions that from real interviews over the last 3 or 4 years that have been shared with us by students who work with us. They've been asked really big picture abstract questions like how have technological advances changed medical practice? You could address this by talking about anything from the germ theory of medicine all the way up to the pacemaker or the MRI machine. You might have a situational judgment type question. You are a junior doctor on colorectal surgery. Your consultant in charge turns up on Monday morning smelling strongly of alcohol. What do you do? This gives you the chance to understand a little bit about how the institutional structure of hospitals works, but is also, as you can see, an ethics question hidden in there. You might be asked a question like, do doctors hold a special position in society? This is a good way of weeding out people who want to be a doctor because it makes them feel important, and also gives you the chance to be a little bit humble. And my personal favorite, the trick question, do you think nurses are important? And the related question, why aren't you applying to be a nurse instead? A classic of catching out slightly self-important male applicants. And you might be asked questions where you're asked to reflect on yourself. This is again where work experience comes in handy. As we talked about earlier, it doesn't need to be a hospital or a GP surgery. It could be as simple as going and spending time working in a food bank this summer, something like that, that allows you to reflect on your experience of giving something to society. I can see you popping in and out of video, Rohan. Is that because you're desperate to tell us what's so good about nurses? I've always liked those little watches they have. That's my favorite thing about nurses.
Yeah, I love them. I actually got my dad one for his 60th birthday recently. So
fab. So that sort of brings us to the end of the informational share of this presentation. We hope it's been helpful. I tried to make it helpful. The other part is what can we do to help? Because shockingly, we do actually have more to offer than the 22 slides that I've just shown you. There is more to us as a company than that. So our main offering, particularly this time of year, is our medicine program. We have really positive results with this. Students who come and work with us to prepare for their application are something of the order of 7 times more likely to get a place for medicine than the average student. Something we're really proud of, particularly since I think based on our most recent sales figures, the average student has probably used one of our books. So those average students aren't even as bad as they used to be, given the successful sales of both the Bmac and Ucat books. But Rohan, you're the specialist on the success rates. How do we do it?
Well, it's a good question. There's 2 main things that I think kind of constitute why our success rate is so high. The first is the program works. It's very rigorous, it's very detailed. It is a substantial intervention. So sometimes students come to us, say, just can I have a few hours of tutoring? The answer is pretty much always no. It's just really not how we work. And I think if you remember, one of the first slides said we are not a tutoring company, and I really maintain that. We are an Oxbridge and medical school preparation school, effectively. So we're a prep school for your competitive UCAS application, whatever university or course you decide to go for. And because we kind of go through a structured curriculum, that ensures that you hit every single tick box. So in January, you'll hit 15 things. In February, we'll tell you to do another 20 things, and so on and so on. We'll break that up for weekly. Obviously, you'll have that extra flexibility, but that gives you a lot more structure in your preparation. So one is obviously the program works, and it's rigorous, it's demanding, but it does lead to results. The second thing is actually we're very quite selective because we only work with students who have the correct grades, are committed and actually dedicated to the program and actually abide by what we ask them to do. So essentially, if students do what we tell them to, we see some very good results. If they don't, then essentially we don't accept them onto the program. Or if in the rare cases where they do say the right things, and I've had some students where the parents have kind of pushed them into saying some very positive things in our initial consultation, but we find out very quickly that they're not holding up their end of the bargain, and we actually cancel the program. It's a two-way process, and this is my eventual aim for the company, and we've talked about this, Matt, is to get to 100% success rates. That only happens if we only work with super bright, talented individuals who are keen and committed for their application.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the selection process later on, but thanks for foregrounding that, Rohan. So as part of the program, there are an awful lot of parts. First of all, you'll have access to our resources. That includes, and I hope this video is going to work, that includes our preparation portal. This is a video that's much too long because I didn't have time to edit it this week. So I'm going to sort of bounce through it. But this is a state-of-the-art online portal that allows you to practice for all of the admissions tests that are required for Oxford and Cambridge Medical School. It allows you to look at not only the kinds of questions you'll be asked, but also how to answer them, as is being shown here in a kind of learn mode. I'm hopeful that if I click forward through the video a little bit, it'll take us through to an example question. Here we are. It allows you to answer these in the context of a kind of revision quiz. Yep, there's some more of that. I should have edited this video earlier. You can attempt all of the past papers for the exam you're taking. All of them are up there in this format that is very close to the style of these if you're approaching them online, which really gives you a sense of how much time you have when you're doing the exam and really allows you to practice under exam conditions. There we are, that's that. I should have edited that video. So I think there's some noise. Is that with you, Rohan? We're also particularly pleased with, we did these last year for the first time, were our enrichment supervisions. So one of the things that students had asked us about was that they were really happy with the preparation we were providing them with for the tests and for the interviews. But what they were finding more difficult was demonstrating their breadth of interest, the depth of their motivation. And so we created for the first time last year enrichment supervisions. These offer students the opportunities to once each week, I believe on a Sunday afternoon, spend time together really reflecting on different aspects of their subject, ranging from deep abstract questions like what is medicine, through medical ethics, through questions about the NHS and how it is structured, all the way up to current discussions around things like vaccine hesitancy. These sessions are chaired by current medical students, and so they're able to really give students who are working with us a taste of not only what it'll be like to study at medical school by engaging in these kinds of university style and level discussions, but to really understand why they want to apply and to sort of give them a foundation for broadening their application horizons and being able to really effectively convey why they want to apply when they come to write that personal statement and make that interview. We also offer day courses. In the past, we would let people book onto these separately, but in recent years, we've moved to these being exclusive for students who are already working with us. These are run over 2 days, 4 hours a day. These will include 4 mock interviews, hours of teaching, group sessions, a really thorough exploration of the application for every student who comes to work with us in an intensive way in the autumn, as well as giving them the chance to see who else they're applying alongside and have a little bit of a more sociable experience rather than being trapped alone, as I'm sure we're all suffering with at the moment. On top of this, we have the one-to-one tutoring sessions in which they work with our tutors who are, they're very good. Selected from the top medical schools, students who've done really well in the exams and the interview, working directly with them to hone their application and to really understand what they're doing in that one-to-one tutored setting. All of these come with a lesson report, which is delivered very swiftly via PDF to both the parent and the student, so that they can understand what is going on, what needs to be worked on. This is from well, I can't tell you, it's a secret. This is from a student of ours applying to study politics, philosophy and economics at Oxford last year. I can tell you that this student got in, and this is the kind of detailed feedback that we offer those students who are working with us to make sure that parents know what is being worked on, where they should be focusing their efforts, and to reassure them that things are going to plan. And all of this comes together, and I'm going to throw back to you, Rohan, to look at our success rates. And they're damn good, I like to think.
Yeah, I think they're pretty good. I think we do a pretty good job. There's always room for improvement, but even if you compare us to the top 50 schools in the UK, what we do is almost doubly effective than what they're able to do. And it's not a knock on those schools in particular. It's just we have a lot more expertise, experience, and capacity to help students with their competitive applications than even most schools do in the UK. And that's just a function of everything we've been able to achieve.
I've actually got an example of that on the next page, Rohan. Very nicely done.
Yeah, so these are taken from. So we don't kind of survey schools and do it ourselves. We just rely on the official data provided by Oxford. So here are all the top 50 schools that send students to Oxford, and actually you can see their success rates almost consistently across the board are well below what we're able to achieve with our students. And it's no coincidence. Preparation works. It's not that particularly highly qualified students will go to a certain institution. Obviously, there's a bit of selection bias, but our methods are tested. We have people in charge who actually look at the data to ensure that what we do does work.
Yeah, I mean, I have talked about us changing the tagline on the website to better than Westminster. The problem, of course, being that our playing fields are much smaller, the buildings aren't as nice. I'm nowhere near as handsome as the chap who runs Westminster, who's changed recently, I believe. Very good looking chap. And we don't have that enviable central London location. So unfortunately, we do only beat them on one thing. Although I suppose also on price, actually, now I come to think of it. I think we are ever so slightly better value for money than Westminster. Certainly than Eton, which I think is still extortionately expensive, and there's still a waiting list. So that brings us on to sort of talk in a tiny bit more detail about our impact. As we mentioned, when it comes to medicine, we're able to get our students in at almost 7 times the rate of students who don't work with us, or as I said earlier, who work with us purely through the context of the book, because that damn book sells so well. It's actually making it harder for us by improving the baseline quality of the student.
It's interesting, when I applied for medicine, all these textbooks didn't exist, so it was arguably, I wouldn't say easier, but it was a different type of competition back then.
Everything was easier back. Well, I say that we always come back every week to my failure to get into Oxford 13 years ago, so it can't have been that much easier. If it was easier, it's even more embarrassing for me. Now, one of the ways that we ensure our success rate is that we are relatively selective with the students we work with. And Dylan's going to tell us a little bit about that alongside a little quotation from Rohan's favorite business icon.
Yeah, so initially we want to make sure that, like Rohan said, our goal is to get that success rate up to 100%. So what's important for us is that we work with the right applicants and the right students, and so that's why you get to speak to me. And we do have other admissions consultants that would reach out to you if you go out and book a consultation with us. So what I would do is, have a consultation with you, just ask some questions around your application, but also really want to find out a little bit more about you. Why you want to study medicine and why you want to go to Oxbridge if you're applying to Cambridge or Oxford. Okay, so I'm going to be diving into where the interest stems from. Okay, where do you want to go with it? And I really want to understand your willingness to actually put the time in, that you're going to need to in order to get your qualification. Okay, so my job in that initial consultation, and I do also give honest feedback to both parents and students at the end of it. In some cases, we haven't had students that wanted to put in the time, and I've told them. And on the same basis, I've had students that would be willing to put in the time. The nice thing that Matt's been telling all of you is that for the last number of years, we've been working with hundreds of students. So we do have quite a good foundation of knowledge to go off of as to what makes a successful applicant for or a successful medical applicant. And it's my job to just sort of do the initial discovery with you guys, so that you can get feedback and so that we can also discover what's the way forward. Okay, so I want to see, your passion for your subject, as you can see from the slides, what kind of grades you're getting, if you are willing to put effort in to not only improve your strengths, but also, dare I say, iron out any weaknesses that you might have. It's hard to admit that we might have some weaknesses within ourselves, right? Obviously, there's a quote there from Simon Sinek, which plays really well into what I'm saying, is we don't look for people with skills. If you are applying to Cambridge or Oxford, most of the people applying to those universities are of high quality. Okay, and so what I want to see is a good attitude, and then we can teach the rest in terms of interview skills and Bmac and Ucat. We can teach that. So what's key for us is that you have the right attitude.
Thanks, Dylan. That's exactly right. As you'll see when it comes to the Oxbridge process overall and with medicine as well, the reason that only 12% of students get in is because 100% of those students who apply, all of them are fine, but only a relatively small share of them are willing to put in the work, are committed enough, are able to demonstrate that they want to do it. You can have all the A's if you that you want, but if you don't actually want to do it, if you're not willing to put the work in, it's not going to work out for you. And so we try to make that selection among the students we work with as well, because there's really no sense in spending 9, 10, 11, 12 months trying to do something you don't actually want to do. You'll lose motivation relatively quickly, and it won't be a pleasant experience for you or for us. Now, one of the ways that we ensure this is through our student honor code. I can see Rohan's popped up. I think it was Rohan. Was it you who wrote this, or was this one of Barbara's pieces of work? In any case, I'm going to leave you to work through it, because I didn't write this, so I'm unfamiliar with the deep logic behind it.
Yeah, so this is a two-pronged approach. This is just a segment of kind of the things we expect of our students, and a lot of it is just very basic stuff. This is essentially the basal level of what we expect our students to commit to from their side, which is they'll proactively schedule their tutoring, they'll communicate with their tutors. If they've been set any work in advance of the session, they'll actually agree to complete it, or they'll contact their tutor. It's all very basic stuff, but this is how we hold our students to account to make sure that they're keeping on track with our recommended progress. Again, our program works, and as long as students follow it, we get results. It's when students go off-piste and off the beaten track and try and do their own thing that we start seeing problems. So the student honor code is something that we expect our students to sign up to and really commit to and live by. And if they do that, then we promise to do our part in getting them to their dream university.
Fab. Thanks, Rohan. Now, the good news is it does sometimes work. Mostly it works. What am I saying? So I wanted to pull out, these are both drawn from Trustpilot reviews that we've had in the last few days from students who work with us this year and have been fortunate enough to achieve the result we were working towards. Not just students who've been able to get into Cambridge to study medicine, something that Rohan as a fellow Cambridge medic is always particularly proud of, but for Oxford, for PPE at Oxford as well. I'm not going to leave these here for the entire duration because they're quite long, and you didn't join a webinar just to read. I could have sent you the slides ahead, but if you want to read positive and indeed mixed reviews of us, please do take a look on Trustpilot, where you can read what people say about us. Now, I'm sure some of you are happy and excited and keen to come and work with us, hopefully, otherwise this presentation hasn't worked. But one thing we do offer for those of you who might be a little hesitant is we do offer a 2-week trial. Dylan, if you want to run us through this. This I did write, but I'm going to let Dylan take charge nevertheless.
Yeah, thank you. So again, this is just a second way for us to make sure that we are working with the right applicants. So obviously, first point of call would be to speak to myself or one of the other consultants to assess the application and also to show you our support. But once we've made the decision to work with you and you've made the decision to work with us, we want the both of us to trial each other out for 2 weeks. So in other words, we want to make sure that what you've told me is correct. And so for the first 2 weeks, we would trial you as an applicant to see whether you would indeed fit our program and we would indeed be able to help you get into your university choices. On the flip side, it's also a chance for yourself and of course parents to trial us to see whether you would be able to keep up with the workload, an opportunity for you to attend some enrichment seminars and get an idea of what it is that you're going to have to do for the forthcoming year. And so that 2 weeks trial is in place for that. And if for whatever reason, if it didn't work out, we would then part ways within that 2 weeks.
Yeah, and as Dylan says, that is if it turns out it's not for you or you're not for us, that is a full refund for you at the end of those 2 weeks. Hopefully you'll choose to stay with us because we're very proud of what we're able to offer, and hopefully it'll work out. And of course, there are instances where there are students we choose not to take on, either because they haven't got taken things in the way we would hope, or of course, in the very unlikely event that there's really nothing we can do. We weren't fortunate enough to be approached by Malala Yousafzai 5 years ago, but I suspect if she had come to us, we would probably have said there was nothing we could do to help. She was already probably going to get in.
It was probably useful to add that the whole point of our initial assessment with myself and the other consultants is just to make sure that there is no case, and usually we go through the 2 weeks trial without any hassles. So, but it is there just for that caveat as well.
Yeah. Fab. And finally, hopefully that all sounded good. You are, with any luck, keen to sign up and get that consultation in. How do you do it? The answer is this animation that you should be being shown to you, which will show you how to navigate to our website and book a consultation. And I'm going to leave that running while we open things up to questions. I can see that plenty have come through already. Please continue asking them. And now we've got to the questions bit, running a little behind time. I'm going to introduce Safia, who is our resident medic, who hopefully will be able to introduce herself once I've clicked the relevant buttons. Let's give it a go. Camera's on. Oh, yep. Mic's on. Here she is. Hello.
Hi, I'm Safia. I'm a third-year medical student at Barts in London. And yeah, I'm not sure what else you want an introduction. I'm very, very happy to answer any of your questions about medical school, how I found the process of getting into medical school.
Fab. There you go. So Safia is there at the front line of these things to answer questions that either Rohan has forgotten the answers to or that I never knew because I never became a doctor. And realistically, I'm probably not going to at all now. Fab. So we have a few... there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to portion out questions to each of you and then sort of come back. So Armina asks, what is the best and most appropriate way to answer the question of why would you like to be a doctor? I think that's a good one for you, Safia, since you've had to answer that question fairly recently, I imagine.
Yes. So, I mean, it's got to be personal to you, so I can't tell you exactly how to answer this, but usually if it was in an interview setting, the sort of things that I would say to my tutees would be sort of portion out the reasons why you want to do medicine. It's probably something to do with science and your like of learning about the body and what goes wrong with it and how to fix those things. It's probably something to do with working with people. Hopefully, if you want to be a doctor, you like working with people. So you might have a good example of why you want to work with people. And then everyone who goes into medicine, I think, has a little bit of wanting to make a difference. So that's how I would approach answering that myself. Obviously, it's very personal to everyone, and I'd encourage you to put your own experiences into it.
Fab. Thanks, Safi. Rohan, we've had a series of questions about international applicants. Can I leave these with you? So Kaya asks, do we work with international students? We have an anonymous question asking if it's a disadvantage not to have done GCSEs. We have a question about CBSE schools in India. And we also have a question again if we work with international students from Joyce. So if you can tackle those at least 3 questions on international schools for us.
Yeah, sure. So very quick fire. I like this. So international applicants, yes, we work with international medics. If you are applying as an international medic, just know that your success rates on average is about 2 to 3%. So it is extremely competitive, and unfortunately, there's nothing as a company we can do in terms of improving the population's average success rates. It's just because the GMC will enforce a quota of 10%. So as an example, if you're applying to a medical school which has 300 places in total, and there's only 30, and for internationals, there's a 10% quota, so it means there's only 30 places available to you. Obviously, the program we work with students on are a little bit more comprehensive for international applicants, and they're designed for international applicants because we kind of go in through a little bit more detail on things like the interview process and communication skills, which tend to be where international students struggle more. If you haven't set any GCSEs, IGCSEs, then yes, you can still put in an application, but realistically, your admissions test will need to be in the top 5 to 10% in order to guarantee yourself an interview. Again, it's not particularly difficult. We have had students who we've coached through. We had a lot of international medics that we got offers with last year. But again, just be aware that you are going to be competing not with the UK, but with the entire world. So it is, not to exaggerate, but it is very, very difficult to get in. CBSE is the Central Board exams in India. It's a bit of a stretch for me to remember all of them, but actually the Indian ones do come up quite a lot. So typically the average offers from most medical schools is they'll take the best 5 subjects that you've sat, and normally you need a grade of A1 or above in each of them.
Fab, thanks, Rohan. I had no idea what a CBSE was, if I'm honest. So we have a couple of easy factual questions I'm going to flick through. Does psychology at A-level count as a science subject? Rohan, does it count, or do I need to research this one?
No, it doesn't normally count for most medical schools.
There you go. So they are sadly not. Do all universities accept the September Bmac? So everyone apart from Oxford accepts the September Bmac. That's Oxford for you. Always being different and difficult. When does the Bmac take place? Asks Bianca. So there's a sitting in September and another in November. As we mentioned earlier, everyone apart from Oxford is happy with the September one. But if you want to apply to Oxford, you've got to do that November setting, and you do have to pick one or the other. For obvious reasons, doing the exam and then doing it again is considered to be cheating. I don't think I need to explain why. I did also mention earlier the dates of the Ucat, which I got wrong. The Ucat this year is in July and August and September, and you can choose between those 3 dates or date ranges. Obviously, because of the famous illness, all of that is still a little bit up in the air, but there isn't a November Ucat. That was me being just entirely mistaken in my slides. Let's have a look. We've got a question about students who don't take physics at A-level. Safia, did you do physics at A-level? I'm hopeful that you're going to be able to offer us a personal story here of people who didn't do physics at A-level and how it impacted them at medical school.
I did physics at A-level.
Oh, damn it. Do you know someone who didn't?
Oh, I know so many people who didn't. I would say I'm in the minority of people. I mean, if you want to take physics at A-level, I think it's good. If you don't, I don't think it's a big factor that's going to hinder you at medical school necessarily. I think that my biology and chemistry have been a lot more important. I'm struggling to think back now to how much I have used my physics. Probably a bit, some parts more than others, but I think it also depends on your course. My course hasn't required a lot of physics so far anyway.
So there you go. Probably the thing to do is chemistry and biology, and then 1 of physics or maths. That's the message I'm getting there, at least from what people are doing these days. Are you allowed to sit the Ucat more than once? I presume not. No, Safi is shaking her head. Nope, just like the Bmac, you only get one go. If you do badly, you're gonna have to come back next year. Again, this is why it's so important to make sure you've prepared well ahead of time. In fact, Razan has asked about this. How long would it take to study and prepare for the Ucat exam? Safi, I can't, is Berks the Ucat university? Did you do both?
Yes, I did both. Berks is a Ucat university. I didn't spend very long preparing for my Ucat. This was a big mistake. I was very lucky on the day, and I managed to apply to the universities that I wanted to apply to, but I would say you want at least a month or two. Ideally, you'd start earlier rather than later. You know, work out early when your date of your Ucat is, and then you should be thinking about it a few months in advance. I'd probably start off with learning the techniques, a little bit of practice each week, and sort of step it up as you get closer. You're probably not going to be practicing for the Ucat hours a day, months in advance, but it would probably be good to step it up as you get closer.
Yeah, so if you're looking at that beginning of August date, you want to be studying from, I would imagine, March or April onwards, just to really, because it's damn complicated, the Ucat, especially that bit with the shapes. Oh, I've nightmares about those shapes. Razan also asks, when is the deadline for the 2021 medical UCAS application? It is the 15th of October, 2021. Same time every year. Nice, easy question. Armina asks, since GCSEs were not sat this year or last, does that impact the importance of them in the application process? Now, we're not going to have super concrete data on this for a couple of years because we won't know until afterwards. But that's a rubbish answer. Rohan, what insights do you have on the subject of GCSEs, or indeed Dylan at the moment?
I'll leave this one to Rohan.
Yeah, Rohan.
Sorry, Matt, could you just repeat the question? You broke up slightly.
Yes, sorry. Since GCSEs were not sat this year or the year before, because they've been cancelled, I think, in the last couple of months, how will that impact their importance in the application process?
Yeah, it's a good point. GCSEs have always been one of these things that's been taken into most medical schools will take them into context rather than just using absolute GCSEs. So even if you did do particularly well in GCSEs, let's say you got straight nines, if everyone in your school also got straight nines or very close to good perfect GCSEs, then actually that means less. Similarly, if you did particularly poorly, particularly poorly relatively to other medical applicants, but everyone in your school did even worse than you, then that is taken into context. Now, because everyone's not sat GCSEs and formal exams have just been given centre assessed grades, the variation and the spread between in the distribution of those grades is reduced, which means that naturally there's a little bit of grade inflation that creeps in. The universities will then have to make a decision. Either they accept the grades and just move on and not adjust their algorithms, or what I suspect will happen is they'll devalue the GCSEs ever so slightly and focus more on the admissions test. Now, conveniently, there's an admissions test for medics anyway, so it's not like they'll have to change the wheel. So in that case, what I anticipate will happen is the admissions test will become even more important, GCSEs will become less important, and that will continue until we have a year when people will be able to take GCSEs properly.
Yeah, this is a really important point Rohan makes about how these things are used much more for comparison than they are in terms of absolute values. I don't know if you've ever been to the Netherlands, but in the Netherlands, everyone is very tall. And so I was very short in the Netherlands. However, in other parts of the world, I was quite tall. For example, when I lived in China. It's not about how you perform in an absolute sense. It's about how you perform relative to the people around you, relative to expectations. We've got a couple more questions on GCSEs. One person asks, I got 2 A stars, 3 A's, a B and a C. Would this be bad if I want to apply for Oxbridge? And another person asks about having caring responsibilities and as well as illness and underachieving in their GCSEs. That's KJ there. Rohan, can you tell us a little bit about those 2 different kinds of GCSE profiles? I think this is a good way of reflecting on how we work with students in the consultation and we sort of run our selection process.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to frantically find these GCSE. Yeah, so 2 A stars and 3 A's, 1 B and 1 C. So those are quite significantly below the average applicant's GCSEs for Oxbridge. Now, please note my wording is very carefully selected there, which is the average applicant. The average successful applicant will normally have around 8 or 9 A stars at GCSE. Again, all of that needs to be taken into context, but that's the average applicant who is successful. The average applicant will have around 7 A stars at GCSE. I had friends at Cambridge Medicine who were successful with 3 A stars at GCSE. I also had friends who applied to Cambridge and Oxford Medicine with almost straight A stars and didn't get a place. So GCSEs are neither sufficient nor necessary on their own. They make up part of the holistic application process. And this is why we'd really need to speak to the student in more detail to find out, because normally it's not enough to say, yes, your GCSEs are good enough for Cambridge, because actually that could be hugely misleading. Even if someone has straight A stars at GCSE, if the other components of their application are lacking, that's not good advice for us to say, yep, those are fine. Your GCSEs are on the low side, unfortunately, but that doesn't preclude you from putting in a competitive application, but you will definitely have to put in a much higher quality of admissions test scores, for example. Oxford would be a complete no-no though with those GCSEs.
Yeah, because of the way in which the selection process works, Oxford do a lot more narrowing down before the interview than Cambridge do. So if you've got a less than ideal GCSE profile, you want to go for Cambridge rather than Oxford, which is better anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it. KJ, to speak to your experiences, the universities and the exam boards are pretty good at taking extenuating factors into account. And Cambridge in particular put a big emphasis on this through the SAQ and a lot of other adjustments they make. So I wouldn't necessarily let that put you off. Again, this is the kind of thing we like to explore in a consultation to really get a sense of your application. That is also a good example of when attitude is much more relevant than achievement as well. If you've had that experience of caring responsibilities already in life, that's going to really enhance your application. And I think there's a very good chance that's going to put you in a position to be part of our foundation program as well, depending on how the other elements knit together. Okay, we have a couple of questions about students who are in year 11 or earlier. Dylan, what is it that we're able to offer to, I'll come back to you in a moment, Safia, as I've left you dry for a second there. If you want to actually, Safia, if you can find some questions you know the answers to in the Q&A so that you're ready in a second. Whereas I haven't given you anything to do for a moment. But Dylan, if you can tell us about what we provide for students who are in year 11 and sort of a little bit further away from that application than other students might be.
Yeah, what I would say is, because I'm seeing some of these questions about grades and so forth. So if you did want to have a little bit of a more in-depth conversation about your individual application, just go onto our website and book a consultation. Either myself or one of the other consultants will reach out and we'll talk about your grades and your school and what you're currently getting support on. In the sense that if you are looking to get support a little bit earlier, so maybe if you're in year 10 or year 11, and you're really excited, you want to start preparing for your application year, we can still do work with you. So also book a consultation. What I want to discuss is, again, what I was talking about before, your reasons for becoming a medic. And if we can work with you, we're going to work on skill development and research techniques and developing you into an Oxbridge candidate before we actually start preparing for your personal statement, Ucat, Bmac, and interviews. So we actually find that if we prepare you from year 10 and 11, that we can increase your chances of getting in even further. I suppose it comes back to what Safia was saying, the more or the longer that you spend working on your application, even if it's continuous and gradual, the better chance you have of actually having good results when it comes time to it. So yeah, if you're in year 10 or year 11, we can help you. Anything earlier than that, I would say wait until you get to year 10.
Fab, thanks. Safia, I understand you've been scrolling through a few of the questions so you can do us a kind of quick fire round of clever answers, all bunched up without me interrupting you.
Well, I can have a go at some of them. So there are a couple of questions here. Can you tell us a bit more about virtual work experience, what that means and where to find it? So I'll pop a couple of links in the chat in a minute. The Medical Schools Council has said that they appreciate that there's a pandemic going on, thankfully, and that they appreciate that you possibly won't be able to get work experience. This is continued advice from last year, and there are a couple of virtual work experiences that are totally free that they recommend. There's one called Observe GP that's run by the Royal College of GPs, and there's one by Brighton Sussex Medical School that's sort of covers different modules. I haven't done it myself, but I've heard it's quite good. They have some advice on their website of other things you can do as well. So I'll pop that in the chat in a minute after I finished answering these questions. There's another question on how important will above and beyond extracurriculars matter for this year's applicants. I have no in-person hospital work experience, hospice care home, although one GP, and this person's in year 12, they're in the process of trying to procure a placement at a special needs school. That would be very good. I did some volunteering at a special needs school. It's a fantastic experience. Yeah, I appreciate you might not be successful because of the current circumstance. Basically, I think places appreciate this. It's really great that you're still trying to get work experience. Places will probably be hesitant to accept you at the moment just because of the ongoing pandemic. I'm no expert on this, but my tutees and my mentees, I advise just be ready for when things potentially let up. If you think back to last summer, things opened up quite a lot. I would just do your research and be ready to email places, call places up, asking if they could offer you some work experience or if you could do some charity work, some volunteering. Maybe in Easter, that might be a bit soon, but maybe over the summer. So I'd just be prepared with emails and stuff ready to send to those places. But don't stress too much because I think everyone's pretty much in the same boat in the UK at the moment. Hopefully that works.
Fab. Thanks, Safia.
Dissection?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, go on then.
So someone's asked, is dissection an important part of medicine and should it affect our decision when choosing between Oxford or Cambridge? Cambridge has full body dissection, but Oxford has prosection. I didn't actually know that. So I go to not a dissection medical school, they do prosections, but we have the opportunity to choose to do dissections in self-selected component things. So some medical schools are the same. I didn't base my decision on it. If it's something that you're really keen on doing, then maybe it will form part of your decision. All medical schools have different ways of teaching. Full body dissection isn't as common anymore. So I think it's more down to personal preference. I don't feel I have majorly missed out by not doing full body dissection. I think either is fine. I don't know. Other people might have other things to say about that though.
I for one, have never chopped up a person. And to be honest, it's never really appealed. Rohan, have you ever chopped up a person?
Yeah, so we actually did dissection in Cambridge. It was certainly a really interesting experience, and I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity. I think I personally learned more from prosection than dissection because I think as medical students we didn't have the kind of dexterity required to kind of dissect in the kind of planes needed to be able to see all the various things that we were meant to see. But it was certainly a really cool experience. You know, obviously, it is actually one of the reasons I chose Cambridge over Oxford. For me, that was really important. With hindsight, I don't think it actually made as much of a difference. And again, it's one of those that regardless of which medical school you go to, you end up kind of growing into it and really like enjoying your time there. So these are minor differences, and of course, it's something worth considering, but please don't base your whole application just because of on a single thing like that.
Oh, frankly, as an ordinary person, it's a terrifying thought. I'm going to speed through a few of the easier questions that have popped up. Again, Safia, Rohan, Dylan, do keep an eye out for any that you already know the answers to, or that you can answer quickly and easily in the chat, as we've got big numbers of questions coming through today because there are just so many damn people here.
I just seen one on the top there, just about, I see some people interested about pricing and the foundation. What I would say is if we do work based on your application, so do speak to one of us. I would say that it would be ideal if we could speak to all of you. We are looking to see how we can improve your application, and it would be price dependent on yourself naturally because each applicant is different. And same if you think you're a foundation applicant, we do have that on our website. But again, if you want to speak to us, book a consultation, and I'm more than happy to spend some time with you over the phone, just going through your application and how we can support you.
And how much does that cost, that consultation, Dylan?
A consultation is free, so I'll give my time willingly. to that. And I do mostly work on weekends and in the evening, as that's when most students and parents seem to speak to me on the phone, and which makes sense. So don't worry about that. Just book a consultation, all right? And we'll go through your application, see how we can support you. I'll let you know about how to work, how the structure works. Also let you know the pricing and which sort of stream you'd fall into, and explain that all nicely for you. So you'll get a lot out of the consultation. So do book one on the website.
Fab. We've had a few questions about foreign qualifications. Your best bet with foreign qualifications is to visit the university's website and find out how they deal with those on a case-by-case basis. Oxford and Cambridge have particularly good resources on this, and you can be fairly confident that if either of them are happy with your qualification, other UK universities will be. But unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the, I don't know, 250 odd countries of the world and their specific processes. So I can't answer questions on those without doing some further research. So if you are in Austria or Uganda or India or Sri Lanka, unfortunately, I simply don't know the answers without checking. So please do look those up with the relevant universities, or book a consultation in with us, and we will try and find that information for you. But it'll be much quicker for you to find it yourselves than for us to, particularly for me, trying to remember the difference between the Austrian and the Australian processes, because I'm just not very good at that sort of thing. I'm just looking through these. We have a few questions about mature applicants. Safia, are there many people who are who you're working with who are graduate or mature applicants, people who've done another degree or done something else before they've come to medical school?
Yes, a lot of people. I'm on the undergraduate program because I came straight from school. A lot of my peers have already done another degree. There are some people who did a completely different degree in a different area like physics, worked for a bit and have now come to medicine. There's a really wide variety of people, so I wouldn't worry if you're considering as a graduate or a mature applicant applying to the undergraduate course. I don't really want to estimate, maybe a quarter of my year, perhaps, maybe a fifth to a quarter of my year on the undergraduate programme would be graduates or mature applicants or people who have done something else first. It's nice, creates good variety.
Yeah, the success rates for people coming in on a graduate basis, I think they tend to be a little bit higher than people coming in straight from school, but it's also a lot more complicated if you're coming in then, as you'll have different experiences and sort of preparing your application. What you choose to foreground is a little subtler in those cases, so it's well worth booking a consultation there. I had a friend when I was at Cambridge who had come straight out of the Israeli Defense Force, the Israeli Army, and that was a really interesting experience they had. But obviously, if you've spent 3, 4, 5 years not really doing anything of particular interest, and then you decide you want to become a doctor age 23, you are going to have to account what you've been doing in the meantime. And that also goes for if you've been doing another degree. It helps to have done well in that degree before you decide to become a doctor. We've got a few questions about our programs. This is probably a good one for you, Dylan or Rohan. Rohan T, another one. God, I thought we had enough Rohans around here. Asks if all of our tutors are Oxbridge graduates. And Amina asks if we provide tutors for just the Bmac and the Ucat, specifically without taking on the rest of other programs. So can we do test prep alone, or does it all come as a set?
Yeah, so to answer the question, that's the whole point of going through the consultation, is that I want to find out what exactly it is that you need as an applicant individually. And so if it turns out that the rest of your application is in a good state and it is just the admissions test that you need guidance on, then we have programs that will help you with that. Okay. However, we do want to work with the applicants gradually and continuously throughout the year. So even though we might only be assisting you with your admissions test, we still would want to start doing it, a bit of work each week anyway. Okay, so do reach out and I can advise you best, which you would for sure know is the route for you individually, rather than talking very broadly over the webinar. Book a consultation and I can tell you exactly what we could do for you. In terms of our tutors, this is, and Matt can tell you a little bit about this as well. But we do have a large number of tutors, and one of our services is being able to match tutors or students to the right tutor. Okay, I think the number is it 4 to 1, Matt, that we have for tutors to students?
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah. What this means for you is that it's likely that whatever university you're applying to, or what subject you're studying, of course, most of you, I'm guessing, is medicine for Oxbridge. We would find you a tutor that will be in the best position to help you. Some of them would be still in uni themselves, and some of them would have finished, but they would have gone through the program that you would have been applying to yourself.
Fab, thanks. As Dylan says, we're really pleased with the size of the pool of the tutors we work with. Now, not all of them are Oxbridge. That is for the simple reason that there is, in one sense, more to life than Oxbridge, but also because when we're talking about students who are applying to medical school at Imperial or at UCL or at Barts, as in Safia's case, it would be strange for us to insist on people who are at Oxford explaining how to get into Barts because they wouldn't know. But our student tutors are, on the whole, people who are either at Oxbridge or in another high-level medical school.
Safi, I'm sure you've had some students who've potentially been applying to Oxford and Cambridge. How have the experiences differed compared to those applying for, say, some of the London medical schools?
I think it's just an appreciation of how the medical school is different and what they're looking for. So just the interviews are really different. I did apply for Cambridge, so I do appreciate that the interview is very different to perhaps how some of the London medical schools do it, but you're still trying to make yourself a high quality, well-rounded applicant for wherever you're applying. And those who are applying to Oxford or Cambridge are probably also applying to 3 other medical schools, potentially the London ones. So all in all, you do need to do some of the same things, I would say. It's just, identifying the differences between them and what you specifically need to do for Oxford and Cambridge if you're applying there, to make sure you're doing that.
Thanks, Safi. I'm going to answer a few questions about the application process and I think throw back to you. Laser Ahmed asks, does doing 4 A-levels impact my application in any way? Well, obviously doing 4 A-levels is harder than doing 3 A-levels. Rohan, I believe you've heard some stories about people who do 4 A-levels and then unfortunately have to actually do well in them.
Yeah, so it's much better just to do 3 A-levels and get 3 A stars than to get 4 A-levels, end up with 2 A stars and 2 A's, is a general guidance now. If you're confident, then by all means go ahead and go crazy. You can do 4, 5, 6 A-levels, however many you want. But the safest thing is just to do 3 and do them very, very well instead. There are some very, very small subset of colleges in Cambridge that will ask or prefer 4th A-levels. But again, you should do your research in advance, or if you're coming to working with us, we'll kind of guide you accordingly. But 3 A-levels is all you need to kind of put in a competitive medical application.
Fab, thanks, Rohan. We've got a couple of questions about making choices that I want to address. Razan asks, he's a little uneasy with the idea that he can only pick 4 medical unis through UCAS and wonders if there's a way around it. Maggie asks whether it's a good idea to take both the Ucat and the Bmac. And Yan Yi asks how to choose which universities to apply to. I feel like these are all sort of related. So if Rohan, if you want to sort of start off, and then I think we'll bring in Safia because I can see she's busy typing. I don't want to try and use all of her capacities at once.
So should you take the Ucat and Bmac? Yes, absolutely. This is something we pretty much insist on all of our students to do. The reason is if you really screw up the Bmac or the Ucat, and you only apply to 4 Bmac or 4 Ucat universities, then you've effectively ruined all your chances at medical school. Whereas if you apply for and take both tests, you're effectively hedging your bets, not putting all your eggs in one basket. You'll have to remind me of the other 2 questions.
Yeah, sorry. We had a question about whether there was a way around only having 4 choices, and also how you would choose which 4.
Right. Choosing the 4 really depends on a huge variety of factors, very personal to the individual, maybe the location, maybe the type of course, the course structure, depends on which admissions tests you're taking and the ones they're using. So that's not something I can really go into without asking another 20 questions. So again, the best thing to do is to book a consult with us, or at least do some baseline reading through either one of our textbooks or on our website. In terms of whether students should take the Ucat and Bmac, and if there's another way around getting past the limit for medical schools, not really. The only real options you have is to apply to a private medical school outside the UCAS process. But obviously those then end up being very, very costly at £30,000–40,000 per year. Examples are things like University of Buckingham. If you're happy to go outside the UK, then obviously you've got a lot more options.
Fab. Thanks, Rohan. There are some related questions about foundation years. Would you be able to tackle those as well? Because I don't know very much about foundation years.
Yeah, so these tend to be reserved for students generally from underprivileged backgrounds or low socioeconomic backgrounds who haven't had the academic support needed to be able to perform well in their exams. Essentially, it gives you another chance of getting into medical school, and they'll kind of give you the skills necessary to effectively get you up to the level that they need you to be before you start your first year. Realistically, the exact circumstances and details surrounding them really depend. So again, you need to speak to one of us, because the advice we'll give you will be really, really dependent on a huge variety of factors.
Fab. Thanks, Rohan. Safia, now your hands, and I hope the rest of you are free. Are there any questions that you've spotted in the feed that you can fill in on? Particularly maybe the question about the EPQ.
Yes, I did an EPQ. So correct me if I'm wrong, but doing an EPQ won't alter your offer for medicine in any way.
Nope.
So no? Okay, good. No, it won't alter your offer in any way. I know that school probably tell you if you do an EPQ and you do well, it could lower your offer for grades. I think that's the case for some programs. It won't be for medicine. I took an EPQ though, and I got a lot out of it because I learned how to structure my time. No one's telling me when to do the work. I learned how to reference properly, write an academic piece of writing and present it at the end. And I think that the skills that I got from that, I'm very grateful that I have now. I also picked a topic that I'm interested in. So if you think you're interested in medicine, maybe you can pick something related. An EPQ is some time that you have blocked out in your school time and your work time to explore something you're interested in. So if you have the opportunity, I would recommend doing it. I think I got a lot out of mine. It might come up at interview, you might be able to put it in your personal statement, but I think the personal experience I got from it and the skills I gained were far more important.
Fab. Thanks, Safia. Again, I'm going to run through a few of the easier ones. Rohan, Dylan, and Safia, if there are any easy ones you can answer in the feed, please do typing while I try and tackle things. Maria Brayman asks, are current grades more important than predicted grades? So the reason they care about your GCSEs is because the GCSEs are a kind of prediction of how you'll do in your A-levels. However, if you already have the A-levels, if you already have your high school exam grades, your IB, your EB, your Aptitude, your Backlog, if you've already got the grades, then you don't have to worry about that in the offer because they already know you can do it. So there is a small advantage to applying with real grades rather than predicted grades. But ultimately, all of the grades are about determining whether or not you can do the work to the right level. And so, yeah, there's a small advantage having real grades rather than predictions. But if you do better than your predictions and then decide to reapply, that can also work. But yeah, the purpose of the GCSEs and so on is to predict how well you'll do at later stages. And if you already have that information, then it's less of a worry. We have a few questions about bursaries and scholarships. Again, scholarships can be quite difficult to find. It's worth doing your research on scholarships. It's not something that we're able to do because it will depend on where you're coming from, which schools you are applying to, which nation you're from, your personal socioeconomic circumstances within that nation, and these things change all the time. They're really complicated. That's an area where you'll be able to do research for yourself. It'll be much more valuable than anything we can try and provide ourselves. We have a few questions. I rather like this one. What about doing physics rather than art as a fourth subject at A-level? We talked earlier about whether or not to do a fourth A-level. We generally suggest not. However, I rather like the idea of doing something completely different like art. I think if that's something that's going to help you have a really pleasant experience with your A-levels, it's something you're passionate about, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be totally opposed to it, but obviously don't spend too much time in the studio so that you don't get the work done. But certainly that's going to be something to talk about in the interview, that you've gone for something really off-piste with that entirely optional fourth choice. We've got a few questions about international applicants who don't have GCSEs. So this was my situation when I applied to Oxford. If you don't have GCSEs, the only reason they care about GCSEs for UK students is as a way of predicting A-level performance. And if you don't have them, they'll just look at the equivalent grades that your school has provided and use them in the kind of same place. So it's not a disaster if you don't have an exam at 16, you don't have predicted grades. As long as they've got something to suggest that you're at the right level, then you should be fine. We've had a question about the backlog from the previous UCAS cycles. We just don't know how this will affect the next year's UCAS cycle. We know that there was a very large number of applicants this year, something like 15% growth for medicine and Oxbridge. But it's worth bearing in mind that we are in relative terms in a bit of a demographic dip in terms of the number of 18-year-olds in the UK. There'll probably be a drop off in the number of international students because of the famous virus. So I wouldn't worry too much. Any changes are likely to sort of come out in the wash and be 1 or 2% either way once you add up all the positive and the negative numbers. We have a couple of questions about tutor selection. Rohan or Dylan, you can probably tell me more about how we assign tutors.
Yeah, sure. So basically, after we go through the initial consultation, how it will work is that I write up a report based on our conversation, on your where you are in your application and what it is that you're going to need. And then based on everything that I've written in my report, like we were mentioning earlier on the webinar, we do have a large number of tutors that work with us that have gone through our vetting process and so forth. And then we would choose a tutor out of those based off of my report that I've written on you guys, okay? So it'll be dependent on possibly location, or it could be the university subject. There's a lot of different factors that we take into consideration when matching the tutor. You also welcome to make suggestions on the call. And that's why I really recommend going on and booking a consultation so we can iron out any of these and make sure that you do get the right help that you need for the forthcoming year.
Fab. Thanks, Rohan. Maria Brayman, thank you for coming again. It's nice to see you again, Maria. Asks, does your choice of college at Cambridge affect your learning with different tutors available? So it won't from our standpoint. We'll still assign you tutors from Cambridge if that's what you want. Will it affect your learning once you're there? I mean, this is one for you, Rohan, because I've never studied medicine at Cambridge. I've only ever studied modern languages. Is he there? Maybe not.
I'm here, Matt.
Oh, thank goodness.
I was just typing a few responses in the chat, so I missed the question. Sorry. Yes,
Maria asks how much your choice of college impacts your learning experience. I think once you've arrived at Oxford or Cambridge, I don't think she's concerned that we'll send them a tutor from Christ's when they're going through a manual. We don't provide quite that level of customization because honestly, it wouldn't help.
It's yeah, I think, we've talked about this. The Cambridge College and Oxford colleges, they're very like just going to Oxbridge is like going to Hogwarts to a certain extent, and your college is effectively the house you get put into. I mean, there's no evil house like Slytherin. They're all pretty good. The quality of teaching varies very slightly depending on which college you go to. Certain colleges will have better sporting facilities, certain colleges will have better musical facilities, and so on. The educational experience is broadly the same. Obviously, certain colleges will have stronger medical departments than others, but the quality of teaching is pretty standardized. So yes, there will be some colleges where you'll have a better educational experience, but I'm yet to come across someone who said, I hate my college. I feel like I get significantly worse teaching than other colleges. That just doesn't happen.
Fab. Thanks, Rohan. I think Rohan did make a small mistake there, which is that obviously John's is Slytherin. Whether you go to Oxford or Cambridge, it's one of the few commonalities between the two. Bianca Gabriella asks, is the medicine course at Oxford much more difficult than A-levels? Now, the point of going to university is that it is harder than A-levels. In some cases, substantially harder. But if you've done well in the A-levels, you will be ready for it. I think the thing that a lot of people underestimate, particularly going to Oxford or Cambridge, is if you're used to being the smartest person in your school and perhaps finding that a little straightforward, the bad news is once you get to Oxford or Cambridge, you are no longer the smartest person in your school, because everyone is the smartest person in their school. And the level of competition and status really steps up a notch. And so that can be a little bit of a challenge, both in a good way and in a way that students can sometimes find difficult. But yeah, it's a heck of a step up in terms of difficulty. But if you can do it at A-level and you get in, that's because they're confident that you can really do it. We have I say a couple of questions about work experience, which I'm going to leave Safia to deal with since she's more recently through this. I think we're going to start wrapping up in the next couple of minutes. So if you've got any final burning questions, please do drop them in now. Luke Vincent has asked, some universities are rumoured to have given preference this year to people who have got achieved grades rather than predicted grades. Is that something that we can help students strategize around, particularly in the context of grade inflation associated with centre assessed grades? This feels very specific to success rates, Rohan. I'm going to leave this one to you.
Sorry, you keep catching me when I'm mid typing. Can you just remind me of the question?
Yeah, so there's talk that some universities are prioritizing students who've already done their A-levels rather than those who have predicted grades because of the centre assessed grades mess. How do we see that playing out this year, and are we able to help with kind of strategies to address it?
I think we just won't have the clarity we need. Ultimately, we have to remember is a lot of these are rumours, and even if they aren't, even if they end up being confirmed, effectively the way the application process logistics work is you won't be disadvantaged on an individual level. It'll be more on a population level, and if you kind of do the maths, it basically means that it's about anywhere from 1% to 5% harder for you as an individual, which you can easily make up using a little bit of application strategizing and also just hard work and outperforming the others on your admissions test. So yes, this year's entry will be harder, but there's no reason why you shouldn't still be able to get in.
Fab, thanks, Ryan. I'm going to run through a few more, and then I'm going to leave us. If all we're going to do is I'm going to go through 3 or 4 final questions I can answer quickly, and then I'm going to end with the most fun question, which I think we're all going to try and answer as a kind of novelty towards the end. I've also forgotten to put the most important polling question in because I'm careless. So I'm going to put, oh no, it's not even set up. We're going to have to miss out on that this week. That's frustrating. Anyway, so Sam Lloyd asks, how do I choose between Oxford and Cambridge? The thing to do is to try and choose the course, Sam. Oxford and Cambridge, once you get there, most people will tell you, very much the same kind of place. Old buildings, about an hour outside of London. It's a very similar system of education. The people you will meet will be relatively similar across various characteristics. If you're choosing between Oxford and Cambridge, you should be picking the course rather than worrying about whether you're going to have one particular set of medieval buildings or another particular set of medieval buildings. That's what I would really focus on. Sam also asks about how we compare with other companies in the space. I don't believe we have a kind of comparison tool on the website at the moment. It's not something we're in a rush to provide. We're really proud of what we do. But if you're sort of choosing between us and one of our rivals, please do get in touch with us through the consultation, where I'm certain Dylan will be able to convince you that not only are we brilliant, but we are much, much better than SixMed. We're awful.
Just on that note, it's really important to kind of talk about other companies because it does come up every now and then. We don't really have an equivalent in the industry, and if you are looking for a cheap tutor, we're definitely not the right fit for you. Please don't come to us looking for a few hours of tutoring. It's really not what we're about. We're really about delivering results, which essentially means that what we do isn't really replicated across anywhere else by anyone else. So yes, other companies will provide very short one-day courses, and if you're interested in that, then please do book on. some students are extra keen and they'll kind of book a program with us, then book extra courses with the companies and buy books, and then they realize actually UniAdmissions was more than enough. So again, please do your research, and in a fair fight, we always come out on top.
Well, there you go. Just to clarify on Sam's question, I'll leave this one for you at the very end, Rohan. He was asking about Oxford or Cambridge for medicine. Rohan has a nice quick answer on this that I'll get him to give in a second. Anastasia asks, is it an advantage if I take A-levels along with the basic exams in my country, even though universities are all happy with the basic exams? I would say no. There's no real need to do extra exams because you always run the risk that you'll do badly in some of them. And the university might then look less kindly on your application because you've done poorly in some exams. If your country's exams are fine, I would focus on doing really well in those. When they say that the other countries' exams are acceptable and equivalent, they do mean it. You don't need to go and do both the whole of the Aptitude or the Baccalaureate and the A-levels and then perform less well in all of them because you overstretched yourself. Armina asks us about prices. So Dylan, can you tell us a little bit more about price? I know we mentioned this earlier on, but I just want to finish off on that.
Yeah, sure. So prices is going to differ from applicant to applicant because, like Rohan was saying, the work we do is based on the individual student. And so that's the whole point of having the consultation. It's also why we want to work throughout the year with you guys. And it's because each of you is different and the amount of work that we're going to need to do with each and every one of you will be different. And so for me, it's most important. I do work with 3 other colleagues that are also fantastic. That'll be on the more than happy to spend some time with you guys on the phone, discussing your success rates, what you need to do, as well as the prices, if you wanted to use us throughout the year to support you on your journey. So it's myself. We have 3 other really good admissions consultants that'll be able to talk you through your application as well. So do go on our website and book a session. If we can't help you at the end, we'll point you in the direction of someone who can. Okay, so it's worthwhile booking the consultation, and if you don't like my voice, like I say, I have 3 others that will be able to help you out as well.
Thanks, Dylan.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask all 3 of you the final question of the day, and while you're thinking about it, Rohan is going to answer how to choose between Oxford and Cambridge for medicine. So the final question is from Maria Brayman, who asks, how would you answer the question, how would you kill a patient without the police knowing? So I'd like each of you to come up with your own answer. How would you kill someone without the police knowing? And this should be an answer that would do well in a medicine interview, just to, up the difficulty level. But while we're thinking about that, Rohan, how do you choose between Oxford and Cambridge for medicine?
It's really easy, Matt. You just apply to Cambridge.
Oh, come on, there must be more to it than that.
They're very, very different universities. And actually what I say is whilst the courses are obviously a little bit different, Oxford's a bit more modular. You end up kind of doing pharmacology a little bit earlier and various pathology a little bit earlier. You'll have more tests at Oxford. It really is more about the environment. Are you going to be happy in that city for 6 years? And that's a huge period of time. So it's I'd really encourage you to go to the open days. There's a little bit of consulting that does need to happen. If you've got particularly poor GCSEs, then definitely Cambridge. If you've got extremely strong GCSEs, i.e. all A stars, and I'm very much inclined towards lean towards Oxford. There are certain key things. So for me, for example, it was the dissection was a huge pull. I liked the smaller city. Cambridge tends to be slightly better at the sciences. I think that's kind of diminishing every year. Oxford's working very hard. Cambridge was also very close to Papworth, so I wanted to be a cardiologist. Papworth's a quaternary referral centre. So those were kind of some of the small decisions that kind of led me to make my overall application. But really, there are a whole host of factors that you need to consider. There's a huge, big article on our website, uniadmissions.co.uk/Oxford versus Cambridge, that you can look into as well. So, once you've kind of gone through that, I'm happy to discuss with you in a bit more detail as well.
Fab. Thanks, Rohan. So, Safia, I'm sorry I've kept you here with nothing to do for so long. How would you kill someone without the police knowing?
Well, ideally I wouldn't. But if I was, am I in a situation where I absolutely have to?
Oh yeah, they're a proper wrong one.
Oh, okay, right. Well, in that case then, no, I'm only kidding. Of course I wouldn't want to. So I know you've sort of asked what are they trying to learn from a question like that. I think they're trying to like see how you think and see if you can think logically too. I would probably go for something that wasn't painful for the patient. Yeah. I don't really want to answer this one. This is horrible. Like, obviously I wouldn't, but if I had to, something that wasn't painful for the patient, probably an overdose of something, maybe morphine, something that was quick. How would you kill a patient without the police knowing? Something that looked like an accident, I guess, or something they wouldn't be able to find in the system. I'm clearly not an expert at this. I won't be writing crime novels anytime soon, or killing anyone for that matter. So there is my awful answer. I'm sure someone else has a better one.
I'd say I'm a little disappointed, but also reassured, Safia. That's what I'm looking for from a doctor. Dylan, do you have an answer?
I'm on similar lines of Safia. Any answer you give here is a bit I don't know. It's a bit. I was probably thinking about it. Most probably, if it from go to a section that maybe someone was already on the way out and get their consents in a signed format to, I don't know. And then if any case that it did come out, then I had their permission that they were going out anyway. That's the only thing I could think of. Yeah.
All right. I feel this isn't the kind of fun, light-hearted closing question I was hoping for. Rohan, are you willing to give us a good answer, or are you still taking the moral high ground? I do have a fun answer, I'm afraid, but I feel like that's reflecting badly on me all of a sudden.
Well, it's interesting because this is exactly what you'd read in the Times or the Guardian. Is students are asked very challenging questions, and it's often they're taken out of context. So my interview when we were discussing this actually was a really, really interesting discussion about this, the structure of proteins, and it kind of naturally led us to talking about insulin. So my answer naturally related to kind of based on the previous discussion was actually effectively an overdose based on what you said, Sophia, of insulin. And it's quite a painless way to go if it's given quite quickly, and insulin breaks down in the system very, very quickly. So but if anyone here is not that I'm suggesting is considering murder, then please be aware the police do have systems to detect insulin overdoses now, which they probably didn't about 20 years ago. So that's my warning for anyone. But that's actually how my Cambridge interview went.
Well, there you go. I've thought long and hard about this in isolation. My plan is that I would knock them unconscious before stuffing their mouth and throat with snow in the hope that they would suffocate before the residual heat of the body would melt the snow, erasing all evidence. And obviously the whole thing while wearing gloves to watch out for the fingerprints. That's all there is from me this week. Rohan, I can see you're still typing away a final answer for Sam. So while you're doing that, please say goodbye, Safia.
Bye. Good luck with all your applications.
Dylan, please say goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. Thanks for coming. I hope to speak to some of you or most of you soon. So thanks for coming.
Rohan.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely weekend.
And it's goodbye from me as well. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Please do get in touch as per the animation. And thank you for sticking with us for this slightly extended edition of the UniAdmissions Open Day experience. See some of you next week, others on the phone, and hopefully all of you through the medium of consultation in the coming weeks and days. Goodbye.
Goodbye.